All right, Nathan, Ed, should we start? Or I can't tell whether we have the number of people we need.
Chantel, do we have quorum?
We do. We can go ahead and start.
Great, thank you.
Okay. All right, we will commence then. All right, good morning, members of the MAG 911 Study Committee. This meeting is now called to order. For those participating, and I think we all are, via Zoom, please state your name when making a comment or asking a question. The MAG public comment process allows members of the public to comment on items on today's agenda or items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction. We'll now begin the meeting with a roll call of all members. So is that you, Chantel, who will be last staff to do a roll call, please?
I will be doing roll call. Chair, thank you. When I call your name, please indicate you are present for the record. Dale Nanigay.
Present.
Thank you. Dan Cotterman. Joshua Wright. David Raymer.
Present.
Thank you. Michelle Potts. Stephanie Heinzelman.
Present.
Thank you. Co-Chair Phelps. Brent Axing. Santiago Rodriguez.
Present virtually.
Thank you. Co-Chair Brady.
Here.
Thank you. Tracy Mills.
Here.
Thank you. Jesse Cooper.
Present.
Thank you. Ali Edwards.
Present.
Thank you. Josie Montenegro.
Present.
Thank you. Chair, we do have a quorum.
All right, thank you, Chantel. All right, we'll proceed to item number 2. Our next item is called to the audience. MAG provides opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. Members of the public are invited to submit written comments via the MAG website. Any comments received 2 hours prior to the meeting have been shared with committee members in advance of the meeting for consideration and will be included in the formal meeting minutes. So Chantel, did we request any requests or calls to the audience?
Thank you, Chair. We have not received any items at this time.
All right, so we'll proceed to item 3. So our next item 3 is approval of the August 21st, 2023 MAG 911 Study Committee meeting minutes. Does any member of the committee have any questions or comments on the minutes? All right. Have we received any comments online?
Chair, we have not received any comments.
All right. This is now the true test of virtual meetings. We need somebody to actually do something here. Is there a motion to approve the August 21st, 2023 MAG 911 Study Committee minutes? We need a motion.
This is Brent Axing. I move that we approve the minutes from August 21st.
Thank you, Brent. Do we have a second?
This is Dan Cotterman. I second.
Thank you, Dan. So we have a motion and a second. Okay, so those participating in the meeting, we need to make sure, Chantel, I'm saying this right. So everybody needs to turn on your video and audio, unmute your audio. We need to see your pretty faces early in the morning, and we're going to participate in a voice vote. This will help speed up the process. If there are those who cannot or do not want to turn on your camera, staff will conduct a roll call vote. Staff will only call on those who did not turn on their camera. So we're going to call you out. Members, please leave your cameras on until after the roll call vote so that staff can count the people's names whose cameras are not on. All right, so Chantel, I can just do a called vote right here, right? So all those in favor, please say aye and look in the camera.
Aye.
And smile. Any opposed? All right. I couldn't tell, I can't tell from my screen, Chantel, was there anybody that you need to take a roll call of that you didn't see their faces?
No, Chair, that was everyone.
Oh, thank you,
Motion
everybody.
passes.
I appreciate it. You can go back to sleep now. Thank you. All right. We'll now move to item number 4. Will be an update on the discussions with ADOA. Nathan Pryor, MAG Policy and Government Relations Director, Audrey Skidmore, MAG Information Technology Director, will provide this update. All right. So Nathan, Audrey.
Thank
Go ahead.
you, Mr. Chairman. And as you noted, I am joined by Audrey Skidmore. So this item today is largely a status update since the previous study committee meeting. Just really noting conversations with ADOA are ongoing. In those conversations, Mesa and Phoenix in particular are seeking clarity to issues regarding transition and timeline for migration to state contract services. So some of that back and forth is ongoing with ADOA. I'll make a few other remarks right now and then turn it to the chairs to share their perspectives on the ADOA conversations. So I do want to note, we really appreciate the patience of member agencies in MR 911 as we work toward greater certainty on our path and our regional future. We will be giving an update at next week's MAG Management Committee meeting on issues around 911. This will largely focus on the federal engineering report accepted by the study committee, outlining the options presented in the report with focus, of course, on option 7 regarding state contract services and opportunities to address issues of redundancy, resiliency, and related. Also at the management committee, allowing for those members to ask questions, get a better understanding of what the study committee has been working on, as we anticipate some decisions ahead for both management committee and ultimately regional council as we map our regional 911 future. Again, I'm joined by Audrey Skidmore in case I did miss anything. With that, Mr. Chairman, turn it to you in terms of your reflections and perspectives of the conversations with ADOA and where we might be headed with all this.
All right. And Audrey, maybe you could just specifically speak to the specific follow-ups, right? We talked about with the meeting with the state with ADOA was very helpful, this last one. We got a better understanding about the terms and the conditions related to the network infrastructure. And really there isn't a need or a discussion that we need to review that. But the question really is about, I guess I would call the software side, the service level side. And so there was going to be a follow-up and making sure there's I think there were 2 or 3 follow-ups, and one was to make sure the service level agreements that they currently have procured are sufficient for the urban core, where we have the higher volume calls, the density of calls, and to make sure that not only they meet our needs, but are they standard best practices across the country. And I think there are a few other follow-ups. So Nathan or Audrey, can you speak specifically to kind of what those pending outstanding items were that we were going to follow up? Because they're just a handful, but I think it'd be good for the committee to hear those.
Yes. So as you stated, one of the main follow-ups was understanding the service levels, and there's some work on our side too in terms of what we expect for a major metro core and what's standard for metro core. Also issues of, who do we talk to if there is a problem and how that process works. So they're providing more information on that. Also on moving forward with the paused project as we work towards whatever implementation we're going to go with, and questions of what the best way, if we do want to make service level adjustments, what the best way to implement that would be, whether modification of the existing contract or a separate contract. And then, of course, we still have the ongoing discussion items around the actual funding levels for the state as a whole, and also funding formulas around how we would allocate money to regional agencies.
Right. And I think for this group, Audrey, can we speak to the idea that one of the things we talked about was the assurance we needed to get from ADOA that in this interim period that we were moving towards connecting or taking on their contract is, well, how you're going to keep MR 911 up and running and servicing
Yes.
the region. And then,
Yep.
yeah, so I think that was a key component. And if there's an opportunity to provide updates during that period of time so that MR 911 wasn't being held hostage or leveraged until you make a decision about whether you're going to come with the state, we wanted to make sure that that wasn't being played out, that instead we were looking at this as a public safety issue of making sure we're providing for the needs of the system.
Yes, yes. So we touched on part of that as when I was talking about the pause project. So that would allow some of the next gen services to go forward and provide, the additional support that is available there. We did talk about, as you said, allowing the region to move forward so that we aren't just stuck. But we also talked about if there were a transition, making sure that MR 911 was up and running to the very last day and beyond a little bit in case we had to roll back, and making sure that that continuity is there so that the people of the region continue to have excellent service through whatever transition takes place.
Good. So for those of you who are still connected to MR 911, I think the point we're trying to make with the state is to make sure that the service levels, the performance measures, the expectations of backups, of staffing levels are sufficient for a region our size. And because we didn't have a whole lot of participation in the development of those standards. And we're trying to make sure that there's a thorough review before we agree to convert to their current system. We want to make sure, and it was assured to us at the highest levels above the 911 staff that if we felt like there was a higher level of services you provided, we could show that it demonstrated that it was necessary for this urban area, and it was considered a best practice in other regions, that they would consider going back and amending the contract or the service agreement they have with AT&T to address that. And so I think part of what's happening, Audra, and may help us understand, how are we going about that review? Are we seeking, I understand we may be asking for some maybe outside help from federal engineering just to help us evaluate and compare to make sure what is currently procured by the state would represent a best practice across the country. Is that fair?
So we did in fact ask federal engineering to take a look at the service levels and give us a recommendation. You also asked the state to take a look at other urban metros and see where they were at. There is not a standard per se for that, but there are what similar agencies are using and what would be consistent with the level of support we were previously getting under MR 911. So all those things are kind of being taken into account.
Right. So that review is taking place. Do we have any thoughts about when we'll be in a position to have, get back with ADOA with our findings and what they found and kind of determine whether or not what is currently offered is sufficient or not?
I believe so. Federal engineering, we should have that information within days, finalized from their recommendation, and then we would be having further meetings with the ADOA to see what their responses were and what they were getting, and have those discussions.
Okay.
So within this month, I would expect that we would be having all those discussions.
All right. Are there any questions, comments from the committee on this discussion?
Chairman, this is Dan Cotterman.
Yes, Dan, go ahead.
So I just wanted to clarify. So you're checking to see if perhaps there's a improved service level agreement that needs to be in place in order to support the urban region as we transition. If I would assume that would incur an extra cost by the vendor or vendors in order to do that, is the idea that the state funding would be able to absorb that? Or is there something, expected of the region in order to augment that, in order to get that level of improved service?
Yeah, thank you, Dan, for the question. I think when that discussion came up, and Audrey, Nathan, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the state, at least their CIOs, kind of opened up and said, well, that's something we could consider, whether that needs to fall under our contract. Now, again, I think the difficulty for them is they procured a contract for the entire state of Arizona. And so I don't know if they would feel like that. If we're saying, listen, when the system goes down, we need a guaranteed response of less than 15 minutes. And if their SLA says it's 30 minutes, and that means they're going to have to bring on an additional person, whether or not they would be willing. I mean, they didn't, I guess, completely commit that they would do it. I think they said they would look at it. If not, then you're right. That I think the option's unknown. I guess the question would we have to pay for that separately, or would the state be willing to pick it up? I don't think that decision was made. I think they were looking for us to respond to what we would like more than that is offered. If there's anything, maybe everything that they have in the SLA is sufficient. But if we wanted enhanced level and we could justify it, first of all, I think we would ask for them to cover it. But if not, then that would maybe something we would have to absorb. But again, we'd have to justify it. But we're looking to make sure that this procured service level that they've spread across the whole state doesn't meet every level need, especially when it comes to backups, response for services, and getting technicians to locations to provide that service. Those are things that we're looking at. Audrey, Nathan, anything else to add to that?
I think that's fairly accurate, that we don't know the answer yet because we don't know if or how much change we would be asking for. So, if it were not an extreme change, it might be that they could absorb it. And also, depending on how they wrote it, it might affect other metros. So, it might not make sense for us to absorb all the costs. So we would have to see how those discussions play out.
Yeah,
Thank
but we'll
you.
let you know, Dan, but that's a good question. Anyone else?
Chris?
Yeah, Ed?
Yeah, I think it might be worth talking for a minute about a little bit more process, because I'm guessing that some of our member agencies are still feeling pressure of whether to leave MR 911 now or wait. And it seems to me that with these decisions that we're leading towards, there's really no point to taking a step to the state individually any longer. But I think it'd be worth us just talking that through so people can evaluate that. I don't think there's going to be any speed advantage to anyone of individually
get
going
further in front of the line. And to be honest, I think my perspective is the way the conversation's gone with the state, I think we've kind of gotten to the point where we recognize we're moving beyond MR 911. We have, the state has a contract. The question is it sufficient level of service for the urban core? Not that we would need to throw it completely out and start with something new. I think we've kind of worked through those issues. But the reality is, did the state, when they established and negotiated these service levels, are they sufficient for all the members, for all the communities across the entire state? And I can see that can be a big challenge, because it's for rural communities versus very urban communities, it could be very different. And the expectation of the level of service, the response times, the need to have, someone responding, and the types of backups are in place are going to be very critical. And the timing about how long it's going to take for them to convert. And while we're waiting for that conversion to make sure that MR 911, with the decisions made that we're moving away from MR 911, we still need MR 911 into the very last nanosecond that we flip over. And we needed the state to be very clear in their commitment to make sure that happened. And I think we're finally getting that a little more articulated than we've ever had before. So that's kind of my perspective, and I think that's why I think Ed's correct. It doesn't mean eventually we're all probably going to be in that state space, but the question is, are we, we're negotiating right now about, well, do we have the right level of service when we do that? We don't want to commit and then lose the leverage to have this conversation later. We need to have conversations with the vendor now before, frankly, by far the majority of the workload is going to actually happen. Despite the number of cities that have connected, the amount of the actual workload of the system is yet to show up on their system. So that's what we're trying to be careful with. What do you think, Ed? Anything else on that?
No, I think that's well articulated. And probably the next item on budget also gives us a bit of a chance to talk about.
Okay, good. All right. Are there any other questions on this before we move to budget? And we'll have a conversation with the managers about this next month or whatever. So, okay.
Next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday. Yeah, sorry. We're already in October. Okay. We'll now. This is just discussion, right? Nate, okay. So we'll move to item 5 is an update on the FY 24-25 911 budget. Liz Graber from MR 911 Administrator will provide this update. Liz.
Thank you, Chairman Brady. So I'm going to go over 2 budget fiscal years. As you recall, we have been asked to do 2 6-month budget cycles for fiscal year 2024. And the state asked us that we not submit any equipment in the first current grant cycle, which we complied. So that's why you're going to see a lot of equipment in the second grant. And just to help us understand, as we're going through this transition and we're deciding the contract and how we're going to procure the equipment, these budget numbers that will be in the grant requests deal with the old system of quotes. So they're going to be irrelevant, but we felt like it would be a good placeholder to let you know these are the projects that are due. These are the ones we're going to get equipment. Please provide funding. But we'll be anticipating as soon as a decision is made on the pathway to procurement with contracts, SLAs that we'll have to incorporate so we can start purchasing. Does that make sense to the committee?
The fact is none of this ever made sense. So I think you've done a good job of trying to make sense of something that's insensible, but.
Thank you.
Anybody have any questions really? So essentially you're moving forward with making requests that just provide placeholders.
Yeah, just placeholders. So for this second half fiscal year, we have equipment upgrade projects for ASU, Avondale, and Phoenix PD.
Okay.
Phoenix PD is still a question mark. They have they're moving to a new building, so that that's contingent on when they can get that prepared to put the new equipment in. And then the PSAPs also have the opportunity to submit for additional equipment in the sense of logging recorder reimbursements and with new additional 911 workstations. And then in the fiscal year 2024 second half, we have Chandler asking for 1 position, Tolleson asking for 2, Mesa Fire for 3, Goodyear asking for 5, and Phoenix PD asking for 10, Apache Junction asking for 1, along with a logging recorder reimbursement. And as you recall, the state has come up with a formula where they determined if a PSAP takes enough calls to merit getting additional workstation equipment. And the one I have currently is from last year, not last year, but at the end of 2022. The state was supposed to send me something updated, and I still haven't received it yet, so we'll go by that, but it's going to be pretty close. They've been consistent over the years. So right now, the ideal mark for a PSAP to get additional funding is that each position has to take an average, or I'm going to say it this way, there should be an average of 5,038 calls taken per position. And everybody above the mark of that, all the PSAPs that are above the mark are eligible. All the ones that are below are not eligible and could be requested to do self-funding. So for the Maricopa region, and those that are requesting additional positions, Chandler, Mesa Fire, Phoenix PD are the ones that qualify. Tolleson, Goodyear, and Apache Junction do not meet that mark. And so that's why we're anxious to see what the new updated number is, to see if any of those PSAPs push over. But ultimately, the state is the one that approves those extra positions. And so we always submit them on behalf of all the PSAPs at what they request. And then the state makes a decision whether they merit additional positions or not.
Okay.
All right. And if there's no more questions on second of fiscal year 2024, I can move to fiscal year 2025.
Okay.
Can I ask a question there, Chair?
Go ahead, Dan. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
So I just want to make sure I understand what she just said. So in this example, Goodyear requested 5 new workstations, but based on the formula 5,000 and change, they don't qualify for one of them, or they don't qualify for 5 of them. Could you just kind of explain that?
Well, if according to the state, they don't qualify for any of them.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, go ahead, Liz.
Okay, so in the next slide, we're going to talk about fiscal year 2025. Same rules apply. This one's due in March of 2024. We don't have an exact date. But these are all just numbers that we created from the old process, and we're using them as placeholders only. It will change. Upgraded projects, and this is Apache Junction, Buckeye, Chandler, Salt River, and Tolleson. And remember, depending on how this committee decides to move forward, it could be most of them done in the fiscal year 2025. But in our tracking of upgrades, those are the PSAPs that are due for upgrades. The additional positions requested, once again, we have Avondale for 1 position, Tolleson asking for 2, Glendale asking for 4, Goodyear asking for 5, and a logging recorder. MCSO asking for 9, Phoenix PD asking for 10, and AJ again is asking for 1 and a logging recorder reimbursement. On AJ, that is not unusual for them to do a logging recorder as a placeholder if they don't get granted the one in fiscal year 2024. So that's basically the same as what we just reviewed, only this is for fiscal year 2025. So as soon as the decision is made on what direction we're going to go, then we'll start working on getting the contract added so that we can start procuring things off it as quickly as possible. And that's where we would have the opportunity to take the state contract and do a purchasing agreement type of thing with the city of Phoenix, and we could at that point change the SLAs for AT&T. Comtech is a state only contract. We wouldn't be part of that, nor would we need to, because it's just network. But for the equipment and the response time and everything for AT&T, that's where is one option you could use for changing the SLAs. And just to make clear of a little history on in the past, we have had the state make SLAs for Metro as opposed to rural. So that's not unusual at all. We've
Okay.
done it before in the
All
state.
right.
It won't be strange to AT&T.
Oh, okay.
That's my,
That's
Chris?
helpful. Ed, go ahead.
Eric, this question, can you clarify, Liz? So take Goodyear, for example. If they got their 5 workstations in 2024, would this be a 0? You would take that off of the 25 request, or is this cumulative? They want 5 plus 5.
would have to ask Goodyear that question.
It looks
So
to
from
me
your
like everybody
understanding,
just
are these-
keeps asking every year until they get it.
Yeah. Well, Phoenix PD actually is asking for 10
10
consistent.
plus 10?
Yeah, 10 plus 10 plus 10.
Oh,
Holy cow, okay.
and I guess it'll be interesting if we all did transition to the state's contract, then is every city submitting something to state every year independently? As opposed to, because if MR911 goes away, I mean, I guess we could just pick on Liz and make her do this all the time, but that's going to be interesting.
I think that this is a discussion that MAG, Regional Council and this team and this committee would have to determine if the city of Phoenix is going to continue as the contracting agency on behalf of the PSAPs.
Okay.
That would be the question of how you want to handle that. Whether there's a technical team in place is one thing, but are you wanting a central location to manage the contracts? Because you still have to have that in place, grant submittals and all of that, whether it's individual or on a regional.
But Liz, the cities that have decided to break off and go directly, they wouldn't be part of that at this time, right? Or would they continue to be part of the
That
Phoenix?
is correct. That is correct.
So it's already pulling apart now, so.
Right.
Well, that should be fun for the state. Okay. Any questions on this?
Mr. Chairman, if I might,
Yeah, Nathan.
and Liz did a great job setting it up, this conversation. I think it's very helpful for the study committee. Just to back up a little bit. So on the FY24 MAG and MR911, we carried out our normal call for projects. So we've collected projects from MR911 member agencies. Those were approved, in fact, last year up through the policy committee chain. Now it's been broken into a part A and a part B. So this due date on the slide for FY24 is the part B. So these have already been approved. So I think, while ADOA was potentially looking at kind of limiting the parameters of what was being submitted, we are just proceeding with our normal process. We're going to submit everything, understanding that we are entering a potential time period of transition. So we didn't want to short ourselves in a region in terms of the resources and need to keep going with our current system. So that's why we're submitting everything. FY25, switching to that. Again, that's a little farther down the road. Those are due in a March timeframe of next calendar year. So we'll see where we're at in this transition path as that gets closer in terms of what needs to be submitted. So again, just kind of providing more context for our normal processes and entering this period of transition. So I think the name of the game for MR911 member agencies and ADOA is to be firmly flexible on all this, and hopefully we'll navigate it together, ensuring that we're meeting our public safety needs.
Nathan, you said it was approved, but clarify. The left-hand column was approved, but the right is still pending, or what does that mean?
I'll turn to Liz for this, but last year around this time, we had collected our projects. We ran it through the committee process. That got a recommendation from study committee up to management committee, ultimately approved by regional. So Liz, if you want to speak to the kind of the types of projects and equipment collected.
No, I want you to just clarify. You said this screen has already been approved.
Correct.
But I'm not clear. Does that mean
Approved by the MAG process or by the
Yes.
state?
By
Yeah.
the MAC
not by the
process.
state?
No, so they divided it into two different, that's the point of it. So they approved the first half, which didn't have equipment. So this second half is still waiting approval from the state when I submit the grant on October 30th. So there is a question mark on whether they'll approve any of this in the grant.
Okay.
This is the equipment, when it says PSAP equipment. Is that equipment that we're requesting compatible with the software that AT&T is running for them on the state procured contract?
For
The one that they're out. I mean, it's, the equipment's the same, it's just a different.
yeah,
software vendor.
so the answer to that is no. The additional positions and the equipment, all those PSAPs currently using are not the vendor that the state prefers to use. So they
They
aren't.
may hesitate funding any of this until that decision is made then.
Yeah, so if by October 30th, and that's when I have to give it to the state, but then the state has time to review it. And with, hopefully by that time, we have a direction. And then we can move and say, we are going to upgrade not only these, but the ones in fiscal year 25 and all of them, because we're pushing over to this platform this way or to another platform.
Any questions for Liz from committee members? I know there's kind of in flux here. All right, anything else, Liz, you need to share with us?
Nope, that's good.
All right, thank you. All right, so that completes item 5. Item 6 is, are there requests from any committee member for a future item? I know we're trying to wrap all this up, so hopefully it's a gem if you want something. Anything? I don't hear anything. I don't see anything. Are there any comments or announcements or membership? Very good. Okay, so again, we will be briefing the MAG Management Committee on these same discussions on a week from today, right? Yeah, a week from today at MAG Management. And we will let you know if there is another another 911 study committee. It may be more about the results of the discussions or inquiries about service level agreements and whether those need to be enhanced above and beyond what's already been presented, or specifically the plans for migrating and keeping MR 911 at its current level of service while we wait for the integration into the state system. I think that's kind of what we would follow up with at a minimum. So, all right. Otherwise, thank you all very much for joining us for this meeting, and no other business, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you very much.